home. And I sometimes like to stop at this little spot that's really close to where I live. There's a little bridge. And you can see down here, it's still frozen. It's still frozen. But I really enjoy this spot. It's very close to home. And there's something about the water that, I don't know if everybody feels this way, but I find it super therapeutic. Not just the cold water, a lot of cold water, but all water in general. And water is really deeply connected to our emotions. And a lot of times I'll just sort of sit on the riverbank and process my day. The world can be kind of a stressful place. The butt's getting a little wet. But the world can be kind of a stressful place. And it's really easy to feel alone or confused or numb. I think that we handle so much stress in our daily lives that we almost think it's normal. And we learn to cope with it. And coping, while it can be beneficial temporary, it's not healthy for us long term. Coping is kind of a trauma mechanism. I think it's really important that when we're coping, we at least try to recognize it and acknowledge it. And ask ourselves that question of what else is possible. Because I don't think we really have to live in this world where we are stressed to the max every day and we don't want to get up and start over. I started my first management job when I was 18. I took an assistant manager position at a retail job in a mall. It was great. I learned a lot about sales and retail. And I was able to apply my psychology. I was going to college at the same time, so I was learning psychology. And I didn't realize how much psychology actually works in the real world, because if you understand people, that's very important. You can take that to any job that you go to. But I jumped from retail management to managing a high-end jewelry store, which was such a fun job. It was very glamorous. Who doesn't want to work with diamonds all day? But at the end of the day, I realized that I was using my people skills and what I had learned about psychology to really convince people to spend money that they didn't have on things that they didn't need. And it didn't really feel that good. It was kind of starting to eat at me a little bit. I didn't necessarily do anything about it, but I started to have the realization that I wasn't really happy. I'd been at that jewelry store for about 3 years, and I ended up getting recruited to work at a bank, which was closer to home. So I took that position, and it was interesting because I thought I was stepping out of sales, but I really wasn't. I wasn't a teller. I was a banker. So somebody that goes out into the community and brings in more accounts and does loan processing. I did all of it. But what I did there to try and make myself happy, where I felt like I was doing something that mattered, is I really focused on community projects and especially teaching the community about credit, because credit isn't something that was taught in my school. And I didn't know it when I became an adult. I didn't understand credit. And I felt like it was a big game. And I really wanted to help people understand how that works so that they were better prepared. So that helped. I felt like I was at least contributing something. I eventually started watching a lot of documentaries. And one documentary I really highly suggest is Zeitgeist. There's three. There is Zeitgeist, the movie, Zeitgeist, the Amendum, and Zeitgeist Moving Forward. If they're not banned, if you can find them, I highly recommend to watch them. They were life-changing. I have DVD copies somewhere if I haven't lent them out to somebody. But one of the things that they talked about was the financial system and the FDIC and what the Federal Reserve really was about and what its purpose was. And it was super eye-opening for me. And I realized, another car, what I was doing by working in the bank. I realized what the banks were doing by putting out loans. I realized how inflation worked. It really opened my eyes to a lot. And I got really sick at the time too. I didn't take very good care of myself in my early 20s. And I just was so stressed that my body was telling me something was wrong. And I ended up, it's a very long story, I'll probably tell you guys at some point, but I ended up realizing that I needed to get out of the bank. I didn't want to contribute to that anymore. I wanted to do something that mattered. And I ended up finding a little grocery store locally that focused on organic and natural, family owned. And even though it felt odd to go from these high-end jobs to a grocery store, I felt called. I walked into this store and I swear I heard holy music coming down from the ceiling and lights, and I just felt it in my being that this was something that I at least needed to be a part of. Even if it wasn't my forever home, it was something that I really felt was on my path. And I went home that day and my husband and I talked it over, and we decided that we wanted to make that work. But unfortunately, because we'd been part of society for so long, we had the dreams of the big house and we had the debt to go with it. And I couldn't really afford to leave the bank position that I had. So that's when we started doing more research and decided to sell our house. It took us a year, but we sold our big house and we found a business locally that was building tiny houses. And so when we sold our house, I immediately quit my job. And I went to go work for that little grocery store. I started part-time. With a few months worked my way up to management, which management wasn't my favorite thing in the whole world because it can be a little stressful, but the store is something that I saw and see so much value in that I really did want to be a part of it. And so I did it. We went tiny. We've been in the tiny house now for a couple of years, and I'm still managing the grocery store. I've been managing the grocery store for 5 years now. We expanded. We built a big grocery store. And I have a community of about 30 employees that work with me in my location. There's two stores total. And I love every one of them. They're all a part of something bigger. And they're all learning. There's another car coming. But the reason I'm sharing this story is not because it's this big epic story, and not because I want everybody to quit their jobs and go work for a grocery store, because you're not necessarily going to love a grocery store anymore. And that's not to say my job is not stress-free, because it definitely is stressful at times. But the point is that you can control some of your stress. You don't have to be in that hamster wheel all the time. You can choose something different. I chose to leave the bank. I chose to sell the big house. I chose to set up a 5 or 6 year retirement plan. In about a year and a half, I mean, the world's the world, so who knows what's going to happen. But I am set up for a year and a half for my husband and I to be debt free. Most people don't ever see that. They work and they work and they work until they hit retirement, and then their bodies are so worn down that they can't even enjoy it. We built the tiny house not because we want to travel everywhere. If we do, that's great. We're set up. That's the big truck. That's the tiny house puller. That's what it's there for. But we built the tiny house because the world is, you don't know what it's going to look like in tomorrow. You don't know what it's going to look like in a year from now, in 5 years from now. And I didn't want to be strapped down to a property that I didn't really own because of taxes, and the bank, because I also wasn't able to do what I wanted to do while owning that big house. So to me, freedom was a lot more important than that big, beautiful house. And I was actually just looking at some pictures of that house today, and it was beautiful, and I have really fond memories of it. But when I imagine myself driving to the bank and having a panic attack coming back from lunch, it makes me miss it a little less. I can look back fondly and appreciate it for what it was. But what I have now is also beautiful. And I'm excited that I have the opportunity to make choices every day that bring me closer to what I want. That some of the things I want to be safe. I want to feel safe, that I'm safe, my husband's safe, my friends and family are safe. I want to feel like I have peace. I'm still learning what that means for me to have peace. It's a daily process, but I want to have safety. I want to have peace, and I want to have time for life. I want to have time to enjoy this water. I want to have time to read all of my books. I want to have time to experience the world before my body is so beat down that it can't enjoy it with me. So, essentially, I think that was most of my ramble for today. That's what the water does. The water just helps all of those emotions flow. Helps me feel safe, brings me peace, and I know that I'm making time for life right now. Thank you so much for watching.